15 years ago, it was widely assumed that the vast majority of brain development takes place in the first few years of life. Back then, 15 years ago, we didn't have the ability to look inside the living human brain and track development across the lifespan. In the past decade or so, mainly due to advances in brain imaging technology such as magnetic resonance imaging or MRI, neuroscientists have started to look inside the living human brain of all ages and to track changes in brain structure and brain function. So we use structural MRI, if you like, to take a snapshot, a photograph at really high resolution of the inside of the living human brain. And we can ask questions like, how much grey matter does the brain contain, and how does that change with age? And we also use functional MRI, called fMRI, to take a video, a movie, of brain activity when participants are taking part in some kind of task, like thinking or feeling or perceiving something. So many labs around the world are involved in this kind of research, and we now have a really rich and detailed picture of how the living human brain develops. And this picture has radically changed the way we think about human brain development by revealing that it's not all over in early childhood, and instead, the brain continues to develop right throughout adolescence and into the 20s and 30s. One of the brain regions that changes most dramatically during adolescence is called prefrontal cortex. So this is a model of the human brain, and this is prefrontal cortex right at the front. Prefrontal cortex is an interesting brain area. It's proportionally much bigger in humans than in any other species, and it's involved in a whole range of high-level cognitive functions, things like decision-making, planning what you're going to do tomorrow or next week or next year, inhibiting inappropriate behavior, so stopping yourself saying something really rude or doing something really stupid. It's also involved in social interaction, understanding other people, and self-awareness. So MRI studies looking at the development of this region have shown that it really undergoes dramatic development during the period of adolescence.
My name's Frances Jensen, and I work at the University of Pennsylvania as the chair of neurology at the Perelman School of Medicine. The teenage brain is different from the adult brain in several ways, but two major patterns come out. First of all, because children and teenagers are actually wired to learn faster than adults, their synapses, where the brain cells talk to one another, are actually at higher numbers in childhood and adolescence. So teenagers actually have more synapses than adults. They also have more of the ability to learn, to strengthen those synapses than adults. We call that synaptic plasticity, how brain cells respond to they can be molded by the environment. That actually increased excitability of their brains is a very good thing. The second way the teenage brain is very different is that the way our brain areas are hooked up to one another, the major brain regions, is a process that takes 2.5 decades of our lives to actually occur. The brain is the last organ in the body to mature, and therefore it takes until your mid to late 20s to finish. And that property that takes a very long time, one of the major properties is the way we connect brain regions up to one another. So it's called myelination, and it starts in the back of your brain and moves forward. So the last place to connect is the frontal lobe. Frontal lobe is important for judgment, impulse control, decision making, and empathy. So when we think of teenagers, one of the problems they have is that they're not really accessing their frontal lobe as fast as they could.
The ability to take into account someone else's perspective in order to guide ongoing behavior, which is something, by the way, that we do in everyday life all the time, is still developing in mid to late adolescence. So if you have a teenage son or a daughter and you sometimes think they have problems taking other people's perspectives, you're right, they do, and this is why. So we sometimes laugh about teenagers. They're parodied, sometimes even demonized in the media for their kind of typical teenage behavior. They take risks, they're sometimes moody, they're very self-conscious. We try to understand their behavior in terms of the underlying changes that are going on in their brain. So for example, take risk-taking. We know that adolescents have a tendency to take risks. They do. They take more risks than children or adults, and they are particularly prone to taking risks when they're with their friends. There's an important drive to become independent from one's parents and to impress one's friends in adolescence. But now we try to understand that in terms of the development of a part of their brain called the limbic system. So I'm going to show you the limbic system in red in the slide behind me and also on this brain. So the limbic system is right deep inside the brain, and it's involved in things like emotion processing and reward processing. It gives you the rewarding feeling out of doing fun things, including taking risks. It gives you the kick out of taking risks. And this region, the regions within the limbic system, have been found to be hypersensitive to the rewarding feeling of risk-taking in adolescents compared with adults. And at the very same time, the prefrontal cortex, which you can see in blue in the slide here, which stops us taking excessive risks, is still very much in development in adolescence. So brain research has shown that the adolescent brain undergoes really quite profound development. And yet, this is a period of life where the brain is particularly adaptable and malleable. It's a fantastic opportunity for learning and creativity. So what's sometimes seen as the problem with adolescents, heightened risk-taking, poor impulse control, self-consciousness, shouldn't be stigmatized. It actually reflects changes in the brain that provide an excellent opportunity for education and social development. Thank you.
Wow. That's a complicated brain I'm learning about, but that's okay because I've got two very special guests that I want to introduce you to who are going to talk us through the good, the bad, and the complicated. Okay, Rochelle, I'm going to talk about you first. Dr. Rochelle Paperny, 30 years of experience with adolescents and their families, having worked in the field as a researcher, university professor, consultant, speaker, and registered psychologist partnered with Lionheart. Can we please welcome Dr. Rochelle? Thanks for being here, Rochelle. And Dr. Dan, you're next. Dr. Daniel Kopala-Sibley is a registered psychologist and associate professor of psychiatry at the U of C, studies the development of mental health in children and adolescents, and clinically, he works with young adults suffering from obsessive compulsive disorder and related anxiety disorders. Okay, let's talk about this. The brain, the good and the... Now, when I watched the video, I realized it's a complicated thing, and as a parent, should I be a little less stressed about what I'm doing, Dan, or a little more less judgmental?
Yeah, I think you should absolutely take at least some of the pressure off yourself, some of that self-blame off yourself. As the video kind of alluded to, the very complex neural circuitry that underpins teenagers' ability to regulate their emotions, control their behaviors, control, all that stuff, is not fully developed yet. And it's hard as a parent to fight biology. Of course, we can help, and we can certainly help, but we're not entirely responsible for it. And so it's really important to kind of, don't be too hard on yourself just because your teen's, upset or impulsive or whatever.
Rochelle.
Yeah, I'm glad we saw that video because we got to get blame out of the way because parents are really the solution. That's who we have to work with, and they're VIPs in their teens' lives. They need them for, as we can see, for their brain, to help regulate it, and they want their parents' involvement. Despite what they may show or say to you, they really want you, maybe not in the way you're offering it, but they want it. And there's two ways. If you can take away today, I think, two words of what we need to do generally is protect our kids and connect with our kids. And we heard the word connection a few times with Jamie, but I think of protection really straightforward is keeping your kids safe and teaching and guiding them and setting rules and expectations and boundaries. The connection part is the more challenging part often. It's about empathy and being able to take their perspective and get the understanding of where they're at and play and laugh with them and soothe them and comfort them and tolerate their really difficult emotions and help regulate them.
Well, those of you that have seen me at this event know that I talk about my kids a lot, and now John is 13, so I'm just going to get free therapy for John right now if I could. But he's right in the middle of this, and 2 nights ago, I had maybe the number one night I've ever had. We were playing mini sticks hockey in the basement, and out of it he goes, you know, it's too bad Grandpa died, because I would have, and he went into this big thing about death and where it happens and how he feels about it and what he wants to do with his career. And then the next day, he's eating breakfast, and I say, how you doing, John? And he does this. And I'm like, what kid do I have? And I'm like, what made him go from this intelligent talking kid to bananas the next day? What tipped that over?
Well, I mean, the short answer is, I don't know. But that specific one, I have no idea. But I'm glad you mentioned this idea of sort of like tipping over. Because I think even as adults, we all have a sort of tipping point. You know, we can all only handle so much stress, so many anxious thoughts, so much work, so much, you know, we need breaks, or we shut down, or we get tired or stressed out or whatever. And I think for kids and teens, that tipping point is just kind of lower, right? They can handle, again, going back to that sort of underdeveloped emotional regulation circuitry, the amount of stress, the amount of weird, scary thoughts they can have is lower. And I tell patients this all the time. Brains are weird. Brains are strange things. They generate weird noise all the time. So when your son gets this thought of like grandma and mortality and things like that, that's a big, scary thought for a 13-year-old. And that might have just been, I don't know, dysregulated him somehow. Who knows what was going through his mind over the next 14 hours until you saw him at breakfast. But that's a big thing to be thinking about as a 13-year-old, right?
Part of it could be, I was talking to someone, they said, yeah, it's because it's your kid. So I got that going for me. But let's talk about parents for just a sec, and how important, before we're worried about the kids or dealing with the kids, Rochelle, what do I need to think about when it comes to my behavior around my kid?
Yeah, I think when we're talking about when your child is tipped over and overwhelmed and into dysregulation, we need to first make sure before we ever engage with them that we are regulated ourselves. And I talked about connection, but connection to yourself. We often can disconnect when we're just like our kids can and get dysregulated. So do a check-in, right? And regulation comes from our nervous systems. It's in our bodies. So if we just take a moment and do a check, where's my breathing at? Is it shallow? Is it rapid? Do I feel this sense of tension and urgency to go and lecture and cajole and persuade? And you know, when I have that certainty and that black and white thinking, that's telling me, okay, I'm probably more in a defensive, dysregulated state, so I need to take some steps, maybe even declare them to my kid and say, whoa, you know, this is really important, but I just need to take a little time and space away, and I'm gonna come back to this. And take the steps to regulate yourself through your body, through your nervous system.
So, and Dan, like sometimes I will feel not just dysregulated, I call it fury, where I'm just like, I could, and it's just like I'm insanely angry. And I'm assuming that's not always the best time to step in.
Yeah, I'd agree completely. I kind of going to reiterate what Rochelle was sort of getting at here. And I think, you know, that first step is that recognition on your part. That, like, you know what, I don't think I'm in a place to handle this in what what you probably know is not the best way to handle it. So if you're feeling dysregulated like that, recognize it, take a step back, and do whatever you have to do. So, you know, take a few deep breaths, drink a glass of water, take a walk around the block, take your mind off of it for half an hour, and then go, you know, try to take care of the situation, handle it however you see fit. And remember, kind of more mentally, I think it's really important for parents to remember, like, this is not about you. Your kid might be all over the place right now. They're not doing this to get at you, to upset you. It's not personal. You're there to help and support and connect with them. But you need to be in the right mindset to do that first, I think.
That's hard, though, isn't it? It's crazy hard. Okay, what about this one? This is another one of my smooth moves, where I think if I get the right lecture, then the kids will get it. And then I'll do the talk, and then I'll pause and I'll go, I didn't quite say that right. And then I'll do it again, and then I'll come at it and then I'm just talking. And I know, I have a feeling you're going to say that's not always the best idea.
You know, words, parents are always stuck. What are the words that I say? And if I just can get them out, I can connect and persuade them. And really, it comes back to, unfortunately, that old nervous system. That's where we're going to communicate with a dysregulated child in the other room. And you're going to be walking into either their volatility or them locking you out just notice what happens in your body when you think about walking into that conflict. And so when you walk in, 90% of the messaging that dysregulated brain is going to pick up, your child's brain from you, is your nonverbals. And that's what you need to pay attention to. So think about, what are my eyes saying? Can I soften them? Can I open them up and really see, and with interest, what they have to say? What is my face showing? What is my body posture? Can I soften it? What about my voice, right? Soften it, slow it down. Don't tell them to breathe. Instead, take a deep breath yourself. If you just do a big sigh, their nervous system's going to pick that up, because our nervous systems communicate with each other, and they're contagious. That's how we regulate our kids. So if I'm in a defensive state, that's going to activate their defensive state. The hopeful news is, if I'm in a really connected, regulated state, that's contagious too.
Don't tell them to breathe. Now, here's a good one. I've done that with my wife. That goes really well. But I bet that's also not helpful, is it? But it's so interesting, because when I'm in it. Yeah. And it's really hard to say, I need to show my kid who's in it what to do, which is to just take a step back. Let's talk about positive parenting. All right, here's some questions for you. I'll start with you, Rochelle. What are some of the positive things parent can work on when navigating relationships with their kids? What's a good positive?
I'm going to hammer home that connection and protection balance. And I think, often they're in harmony with each other. We're protecting them, and we're also connecting. But sometimes they're at odds with each other in these challenging conflict kind of situations. And I think if you can remember to never lose that connection in your efforts to protect. Because if you do so, you only create more distance, and then your efforts to protect can't reach them. They're less effective. So maintain the connection.
That's not easy, but
No.
I will.
No.
Now,
No.
another one for you. What's your take on the same situation? What's one thing I can do? For example, when I say, that's it. No more games. That's it. Give me your phone. Good? Bad? Was I doing great there?
Well, yeah, I have. The research on this topic largely studies broad kind of parenting styles. It doesn't sort of say, do this in situation X. So what you're describing is sort of known as the authoritarian parenting style, which is kind of the do what I say because I told you to do it. Don't don't talk back.
Because I said so.
Because I said so. Exactly. That's not great. That's the one parenting style we know that leads to less optimal child mental health outcomes. What you want to do instead, now you can still set limits. You have to set limits, but they have to be appropriate to the situation, appropriate to your child's age, and they have to be explained. There has to be a rationale and a reasoning behind them. Because then even if your child doesn't like what you're saying, they disagree with you, they don't want to be told they can't stay out past whatever time or whatever it is, they at least kind of get the messaging, you're doing this out of concern and care for them, for their own good.
Can I jump in there? That's a perfect example of protection and connection. I'm putting these rules in place because I'm your teacher, your guide, and I'm here to keep you safe. But at the same time, I'm going to give you an explanation to show I understand it's challenging for you, and this is why, because I care. So it's a nice balance.
Well, here's another thing I like to do. I like to, I'm doing well, aren't I? When I'm with my kids, I think I've got to fix this, and I got to fix it now, because if I don't, then everything's going to go crazy. And I just get in there and solve the whole problem, assuming that's not the best answer, Dan.
I think it's a totally natural impulse, right? We don't want to see our kids distressed. We don't want to see them failing, doing badly at things. But ultimately, learning to problem solve, whether that is like a concrete stressor at school, like how do I do better in this class, or dealing with negative emotions or difficult relationships, is one of the most fundamental tasks that we all learn as we grow up. And part of your job as a parent, I think, is to let them learn that somewhat on their own, at least. And of course, you're still there for when they get stuck, when they need help, when they need support. But you don't have to immediately go and problem solve everything. If they really seem stuck, they really are, really struggling, of course, step in, help them.
Okay, I'm going to throw a curveball at both of you because it struck something. I did not do well in grade 8, and I didn't do well in grade 9. So in my head, John is now in grade 8. I got to fix that now because I don't want him to have, and then I'm guessing that also is not the best impulse to say, I'm going to fix me through him, so help me God.
Yeah, that's a lot of things, is getting that distance, not projecting your own stuff onto your own kids. That's a whole other therapy session we don't have time for today, folks. But I think allowing your son to make some mistakes is also good, and in grade 8, it's a perfect time, provided that they're relatively safe outcomes if they fail. But again, to your problem-solving ability, allow them to maybe, louse up in grade 8. What are the stakes there? And to be able to learn from that consequence without you going, I told you so, but really going, okay, what did you learn there? How can I help you?
I'm so glad you two are here because we can straighten me out.
Can I add just one thing to what Rochelle just said? Just like tiny little thing, like one little mentor, like your child is not you. And that's really important to remember.
Gosh, don't you hate it when they're right? Okay, now we're going to talk about some not so positive parenting. We can call this section Dave if you want. One of the words that you used that I find you kind of helped identify something I do, which is in the moment of something going south, in my head, it's going to go south forever, it's going to cause more south, and it's just going to be awful. And you said, Dave, we call that catastrophizing. Can you talk a bit about what I might want to do with that?
So of course, kids can be, hopefully as fully developed, well-functioning, mature adults, we know that, we know that, a tiny little mistake, failure, screw-ups, things like that is not the end of the world, right? We can recover and bounce back from that. Kids don't always know that. So if your child comes home and says, oh God, I did badly on a test, I'm never gonna get into college, I'm gonna be a failure. And if you respond to that by also losing your cool, reacting as if this really is the end of the world, well, kids are very much, there's a lot of sort of monkey see, monkey do kind of, like kids look to those around them for how to regulate their emotions and how should I react in this situation? They look to their parents for that. And so if you catastrophize and really make a huge deal out of it, well, the kids are going to respond accordingly.
It's so important for me to just to say they're watching how I handle stress right here. This is what I am doing, is helping them handle stress by being that example. You talked about don't assume you know. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, I think that so often we're just looking at their outside behavior and labeling attributions, or we think we know what they think. Dave, in your case, you would just assume your son was exactly like you and had the same thoughts and feelings that you had and is going through the same stuff. No, we need to explicitly not imply stuff, but explicitly ask and be curious about what's going on the things we can't see, their thoughts, their feelings, their interests, their understanding of things in the world around them. That's constantly changing, particularly during the teenage years. So what they thought yesterday is different than a week from tomorrow. And so we need to go and ask them, okay, it looks like you're really into this now. Tell me about that. Or, you seem a little irritated today. What's going on? Find out how they're making sense of the world and politics and the environment or whatever the issues are. Get to know them, because that understanding is everything in terms of connection. And then we can, with that understanding, we have their perspective, we can respond rather than react to them, and help them get through so many things with better harmony.
Oh, okay. I'm going to try that. I'll try.
Okay.
You talked about hate the sin, love the sinner. What do you mean by that one?
I think everybody's sort of heard that saying before. Yeah. I could speak for a very, very long time about the fundamental importance of unconditional positive regard towards your children. And I like that saying, hate the sin, love the sinner, because it means that we don't condone bad behaviors. We set limits. We say no some or much of the time even. But no matter what your child does, they do badly in school, they screw up in sports or some other activity, they misbehave, they do something irresponsible, they lack empathy, whatever it is, you love them and are proud of them and like them unconditionally. Because when children are loved or are liked or whatever, conditionally, it's like, oh, I like you more when you get straight A's. Well, they internalize that message over time, and they learn that if I fail at things in life, I'm not as good of a person. People's regard for me is going to be conditional on how good I am at things. And
That just breaks my heart, because it's so easy to do, but it's heartbreaking to think that. I don't want to go too negative, but it's helpful for people to know. What are some signs that I should be looking for? I'll start with you, Rochelle, of, okay, now things are getting into the more serious, this isn't normal brain, this isn't normal adolescence, things should take a better look.
Yeah, I think social isolation and withdrawal, rigidity. So if you start to see rigid patterns in terms of their behavior, their routine, their eating, narrowing focus on borderline on obsessing about something, emotional reactivity, changes in sleep, changes in eating patterns, as someone said, as well as their health. A lot of health complaints, stomach aches. A lot of it is somatization of anxiety and different emotions. So looking at that, did you have something to add as well?
No, you've covered a lot of them. I'd add little things like irritability beyond the norm for them. All teenagers can be irritable, but irritability beyond what you're used to. Withdrawal from the things they normally enjoy. If they're a big video gamer and they're like, I don't like video games. I don't want to play video games anymore. And they have not just moved on to a new hobby, but they seem to not be, the technical term is anhedonia, but they don't really seem to be enjoying the things they normally would. Social isolation, self-talk around, being self-critical, feeling guilty, feeling hopeless, feeling worthless, kind of comments like that. Those are all some other, on top of what Rochelle mentioned, those are all some other kind of warning signs I would look for.
And as Jamila said, and that's why we're here and supporting Lionheart, don't wait till the house is on fire. If you're in the room and you're not sure and you're nervous, phone Lionheart. That's why they're there. You don't have to wait until everything's a crisis. They're there to help you. Can you, Rochelle, what do you think of the state of kids? It's easy for me in my little world with my family to go, oh my God, and to just get wound and nervous and I've heard mental health and everything's going to be. What's your sense of us?
I think a good thought to keep in mind is it's never as good or as bad as you think it is. You can catastrophize, or you can lull yourself into thinking this is all going to go away and just get comfortable. I think if you can think of yourself as the holder of your teen's kite string and not go too high with them and not go too low, and just keep it steady and keep that connection to them is really important. That you'll get through. Just get to 25 to when that brain is very mature. I have a 27-year-old, and I saw her make that transition. She's now a therapist. And I have my 23-year-old in the audience.
2 more years.
Leo? Yeah. He's almost there. Keep it up. And then I'll be coasting.
But seriously, that's very comforting.
Yeah.
And does it, for those of us that are in the middle, up to our necks going, it does get better.
It does. It can be very bumpy. But I think the most important thing, if you can take away, is really maintaining that connection, because you can get through a lot as long as you know what's happening. They can come to you, they can feel safe, and also when you need it, realize that you can get supports beyond your family at Lionheart.
I don't want to just end it, but any final thoughts, Dan?
Oh, just it's very easy to, youth mental health and young adult mental health is a serious and far too common problem, but the majority, and even the large majority of teens will be okay. And I think it's important to distress, anxiety, sadness, anger. These are normal parts of growing up. You don't need to think that, oh, my kid is, oh, geez, what's happening? Just because they have what are in fact totally normal emotions for their age. One thing we talk a lot about, not today, but in other, well, never mind, so I'm getting off track there, is resilience. Kids really are quite resilient. Even in the face of pretty substantial stress, many or most kids will be okay. But when they're not, there's help out there.
Help. I always think when the toilet explodes, you just want the plumber to show up and go, I got this. Or when the car breaks down, you want the mechanic to say, don't worry, I got this. And in a room like this, I'm just so grateful that Lionheart and that you two got this. So Dan, for the work that you've spent your life doing, and you, Rochelle, can we thank them for getting it? Thank you very much, both. This is great. Thank you. You're free. That was awesome. Thank you, Rochelle.